So I'd just like to introduce this session 2 on the subject of the RHI consultation. It's going to be led off by Tom Bruton. Most of you know Tom. I just draw attention particularly to the fact that Tom led Erbia's response to the initial consultation on the RHI over 12 months ago, and probably many of you have seen that submission. And I think it has been quite influential in how the latest document has emerged and some of the considerations that are in there. So Tom is going to talk to us about the key points of that, and then Fred Tottenham is going to chair a question and answer session after that. So we will have a good bit of time for questions and answers. So I'd encourage you to start thinking about the things if you haven't got them on the tip of your tongue already. We would really appreciate as much feedback as possible. This is our first step in compiling our response to the consultation document, so everybody's input is welcome. So with that, I'll hand over to Tom.
Still legitimately good morning. Apologies for the late changes to the agenda. You may possibly be subjected to a double dose or a second talk from me later, speaking briefly about district heating, which was the original conference agenda. But in light of the whole renewable heat consultation paper coming out 10 days ago or a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to just reintroduce the topic and lead out a discussion session on that today. Look, my main role in life, I know Porrick did say many here know me, but my main role in life is I'm an energy consultant. I give advice on energy projects and on energy policy independently to either businesses or projects or organisations such as Erbia. So I was paid as an independent consultant to prepare the previous submission to the RHI. So look, what I'm going to speak about just briefly here is the heat market context. Some material there. I'm going to talk about the current consultation on the table. There's some good news in there, there's a few questions in there, lots of questions really. I know we're supposed to have a Q&A later. I don't have all the A, there's plenty of Q's, you know, so it's really about a discussion as well, you know. If we've time, just look at the RHI modelling that we previously undertook 2 years ago at this stage, and the role of Erbia or the industry in this. So just by way of kind of background and looking at the general thermal energy market or the thermal energy balance, and this information is adapted and a little bit dated. It's from 2013, but the profile still stands. Our heating market is dominated by the residential sector. So almost half of our heat use is in the residential sector. And the RHI is not primarily concerned in its current form with the residential sector. It's concerned with the commercial and industrial sector and the public buildings. And while oil is actually still a very dominant fuel in the heating sector, in the residential sector, it accounts for, I think, 40-something% of demand in the residential sector. Outside of that, in the industrial and commercial sector, gas is the dominant fuel, or gas is the fuel of choice. So we're being heated here today by a gas CHP engine on the roof here, which makes a lot of noise and is very disturbing when you're trying to play golf on the 10th green, but it's doing a great job. I should just all these figures exclude electricity, which I'll come on to in a moment. Hi. Well, just to sort of talk about the context or the competition for renewable heat, and our chairman Fred is here demonstrating his love affair with gas boilers. They're wonderful. They're available in 24 out of 32 counties. The sliding tariff makes them very competitive. The more you use, the cheaper it gets. And the modularity of them, so you can set up 1,000 kilowatt cascading boilers in a row and deliver a megawatt of thermal power very flexibly and easily, and they're off the shelf. So that kind of boiler actually accounts for over half of all new boiler sales in Ireland. Just moving on to, it was hidden until some excellent research by SEAI actually in 2014, going out and very actively surveying the commercial heating market. And the results of this extensive survey, I think they surveyed 1,000 different units and profiled the heating sector a bit better. Matthew Clancy will correct me on any of the details in this, but it was Matthew brought this to my attention, that the role electric heating plays. There's 40,000 retail units roughly in Ireland, and 80% of them are heated by these kind of electrical overhead units that you, as seen here in the local Starbucks. And apart from that, half of all offices, half the restaurants, half the pubs in the country are heated by that sort of unit. And it's understandable to an extent. It's modular, it's low cost. You can add them on as you need, and they deliver both cooling and heating or humidity as required. So there's enough advertising the alternatives, but certainly, just back to the electricity. That's something that bioenergy as a renewable heat source will make. Will really struggle to make inroads into that particular sector because there's no wet heating system in place. So, hopefully other solutions or innovations, particularly on the heat pump side, will be relevant and appropriate there. Just a sort of last piece of sort of context, and something I've talked about before and to come back to, is just, maybe if you're involved in boiler sales or renewable heat solutions, you're in this frame of thinking already, but it's about what pushes people to make that decision to get off the gas boiler and to get onto a renewable heat solution. And I group these into kind of passive events and more active events. And on the very kind of obvious one is, we're building a new building, how are we going to heat it? And so that new build segment accounts for about 20% of all commercial boiler sales. And outside of that, then all the remainder of boiler sales are where the boiler is clapped out, needs replacing, or you're undertaking a wider building refurbishment and you need to look at the options. On the more active, on the policy side, which is where we're kind of moving now, is things like capital grants. We've experimented with them in Ireland. There were extensive grants actually really for heat pumps, solar thermal and biomass boilers, which all came to an end in 2008, and there's been relatively very little happening in the renewable heating space for biomass certainly since then. Fuel taxation, we do have a modest carbon tax in place, which is part of the push towards non-fossil fuels. And what we're sort of what's on the table now at the moment is a more operational subsidy, or essentially a pay-as-you-go type subsidy or renewable heat incentive. So I'm not going to talk in detail about them. It's just to give some context on how we approach this initially. So on to the kind of what's in front of us at the moment, the second consultation phase. It's been issued by the Department of Climate Change. Sorry, I need help with that. Climate Change, Action and Environment, something like that. We do have Des and Caroline here today will. But their paper's available there, and it's open for submission until the 3rd of March. The timeline, I'm not sure what to say about this. It was first conceived in May 2013. I did. My wife had a child in April 2013, so the child is now in primary school. You know, God knows where she'd be by the time we're through the process. It's been a long one. Then we had the draft bioenergy plan a year later, and then a year later we had the first consultation, which was closed in September 2015, and now we've the second consultation due in March 2017. Second and final consultation, as we understand it now. You know, and the main driver behind this is this gap to the 2020 targets, and you know, Fergal's gone, but I'd wholeheartedly agree that we need to think way past that. But still, like, this is the immediate short-term driver, is a 2020 target and the gap to target, and the idea is that 200,000 tonnes a year of oil equivalent will be stimulated by an RHI. So the very simple calculation means that while this 4-year gestation has gone on, is that we've burnt 800,000 tonnes of oil. It's hard to conceive of that amount, but that's what's happening and each and every month that's going on, and it's irrevocable. Anyway, on a more positive note, I sort of moving on from the obvious delays and the welcome progress of having a next step. You know, certainly from my you know, I just did some initial analysis to speak about today, and to put some of my initial thoughts together about what the good news is, but everyone in Erbia and outside of it will have their own view. But there's definitely been a clear impact of putting in coherent submissions by Erbia and its members. There were only 75 submissions in total into this process, and it's refreshing even for the cynical among us that stuff actually does get adapted into it eventually. It was reassuring. So good news items there, like the wood fuel quality assurance scheme has emerged as the preferred option for biomass fuel quality. That was part of the recommendations put in by Erbia, and something that's very positive, as Erbia is the custodian of the scheme. There's pretty much a decision made that gas is the counterfactual fuel, and by counterfactual I mean the competing fuel of choice, or the fuel that has to be compared with the renewable heat solution to get off, or the competition essentially is gas. A strong preference for tiering has emerged, which was a key part of the sort of Erbia research and submission. And by tiering, it essentially means, I think that Dennis Naughton, in fairness to him, came out on the airwaves and explained it quite well. He said, the more you earn, the more you burn, the less you earn. So the bigger you are, the more heat output you have, the economies of scale you achieve, any rate payable or revenue payable does decrease, which is an important cost control. There's a recognition that the emissions trading scheme sites, so bigger industrial sites, certainly the flavour of the original consultation was that they would be pretty much off the table or excluded from consideration. But there's definitely a recognition in there that would be a major market limitation, to say that there's 100 industrial sites around the country that you can't go near with this type of heating solution. So that's emerged, that's still there. They've acknowledged the need to go beyond just the new boiler or replacement market, and that to a certain extent it almost needs to be over-incentivised to get people to take action in the short term. So to get the people that don't have to put in a new boiler, or whose boiler hasn't broken down, to actually consider this as a solution. There's a preference for budget controls, so budget cap and degression mechanism. I don't think we're going to talk extensively about the Northern Ireland RHI, but pretty much the fundamental problem is a lack of cost controls and a lack of degression mechanism there. So That's clearly emerged as something important, and also that it would be a 15-year contract between the preference is for a 15-year duration of contract for a heat outputter with indexation. In terms of surprises, well, I don't know if it's surprising or welcome news, or I'm not sure what my own views on it are, but basically every technology that could be is still included for consideration. So it's kind of one for everybody in the audience, which and that includes many opportunities for bioenergy use, both solid biomass, through electricity generation as well, through CHP, through direct air heating is on the table there, and through anaerobic digestion and injection of biogas into the grid. And also there's a sort of relatively poorly specified energy from waste section. Seems to indicate there might be a case-by-case evaluation of opportunities for waste heat from energy. Heat from energy to waste installations. The obvious limitation of that, I mean, it's brilliant that everything's on the table, and Matthew Clancy gave the message earlier that, yes, that there's no need for argy-bargy between technologies competing for things, but I mean, there is a finite pot, and it is exchequer funded, and so somebody has to foot the bill for it. And also there's quite substantial complexity in having a wide array of technologies involved, so it's not as the approach in the UK was to introduce the technologies on a phased basis. So as the scheme grew, or as the systems grew, then more and more was added in over time. Just some sort of maybe. I'm sure I'm echoing the thoughts of some others here when I'm talking about the actual consultation process itself that the department is running at the moment. So all of those, the 75 previous submissions to the last iteration, none of them are published yet. So coming from a kind of a position of lack of awareness or knowledge about other stakeholders' interest and where people are coming from, it's probably less helpful than more helpful to not have that publicly available. Equally, there's ongoing consultancy analysis, or there has been actually completed consultancy analysis of RHI costings of biogas and AD policy options. They've been completed by consultancies in the UK in both instances, not yet published, so not available for stakeholders to feed into this process. If CHP or AD electricity generation is on the table, then the parallel work on RHI supports on renewable electricity is that there's no visibility on that. That hasn't been completed, and so it's a step behind the RHI in its development. But if you're into CHP, you're only getting one half of the equation. It's impossible to balance that equation with RHI. And the consultation paper, which was flagged to me anyway, are there going to be rates in this? There's no rates, there's no visibility on financial aspects. There's no information about the suggested budget, scale of a scheme, or even the duration of how long a scheme might be open for or run for. That's a big blank. So anyway, so that's just on the actual process itself. But then moving on to what is actually within the document, and what the Bioenergy Association and other stakeholders, you as suppliers, are being asked. First and foremost, should ETS be included in an initial phase? I don't have the answer to that. It's a question. There's questions about energy efficiency in there, concerns about setting a baseline or demonstrating your energy efficiency compliance. I will volunteer an opinion that Exceed is suggested in there, which from my experience with Exceed is absolutely not suited to any kind of small heating system. It may suit large infrastructure projects. So BER assessment is proposed as an idea there as well. Open to over to you, to everybody to think. There's an open question about a minimum technology standard, without being specific in any way about what that should be. Quality standards, installation standards, that sort of thing. There's quite a discussion around heat use eligibility, which is a key concern for AD plants, for people drying biomass, for anyone just wondering what kind of heat use is eligible under this, and that's not fully answered. That's still in there as a key consideration. Emissions of particulates, NOx, that's in there as a key concern. The UK approach has been preferred or suggested. You're being asked, is that okay? Sustainability, there's too big a section to even talk about here today. There's a number of several pages and 9 questions about sustainability. And should we follow the UK model? Should we follow the suggested Renewable Energy Directive approach in the winter package Matthew alluded to? And again, this idea of deemed heat use, so not actually metering small installations, that's on the table. That might be more efficient. So moving on, some stuff that's not in there. I mean, in fairness, that couldn't really anticipate Brexit or cross-border trade or flow of biomass. Or that sort of stuff is great unknown, and I'm not sure as much can be done about it, but it's just something to think about. One that I feel is more important is the exchequer funding and continuity of a system. It seems to be kind of decided that it's going to be exchequer funded. And that pretty much means that each and every year in October you're reliant on the Minister for Finance to announce the continuity or the longevity of a scheme. And the electricity sector has been very privileged in that regard. There's a PSO levy on your bill which has been ring-fenced to pay for renewable electricity support. So that's not on the table here. So just parallels. I'm not going to. I mean, I do want to. I don't want to dominate the discussion. I don't want to move on. There's considerations there around financial solutions, and do financial providers or equipment providers have solutions there ready to finance at a smaller scale or meet the needs of this particular market? And a lot of questions on the supply side and the supply chain. So this is a demand-led measure, but certainly the Quilcha presentation alluded to the need to bring along supply at the same time, and I know there's working groups which Eugene Hendrick has been heavily involved in as well, working on that. I'm going to skip through. I mean, our previous research focused pretty much on solid biomass combustion, and in the absence of the department coming out with any proposed rates or publishing their analysis, I'm just going to very briefly maybe refresh people on what we had recommended a year and a half back. So I'd been asked to go away and model stuff independently and do surveys on cost of boilers and cost of fuel, and work out what would it take to encourage this move. I won't dwell on that. We did a cost survey stating the bleeding obvious that biomass boilers cost 4 or 5 times what gas boilers cost. So it's just, I don't want to go into the detail of this, just to give you a background of the process we went through, but it was to model, well, what would be the annual incentive required for this scenario and that scenario, and what would be the payment amount. And that was translated into a recommended tariff or tiering system. And the simple recommendation made at the time was the first 1,000 megawatt hours or 1,000 units of heat would be paid at a reasonably high rate of 7.6 cent it was at the time, based on gas costs and wood fuel costs. And then anything above that would be paid at a much reduced rate of 2 cents per unit. And the net effect of that is to deliver the level of subsidy to the different systems in a different way, and it wasn't linked to the size of your installation, it was linked to the need. So anyway, that was just what Herbia had done in previous research and what was on the table, it's not by any means a reflection of what's being carried out within the department by the modelling of element energy. I just motor along here. There's what should RBA be doing here? I mean, look, there's been too many casualties. There's so many people gone working in other industries or businesses closed down over the last 10 years. It's all sort of skills drain when people just disappear off into the horizon and go working in the wind sector or wherever else, you know. And you know, RBA has a big role there in working on excellence across the supply chain, on quality assurance, big part of what RBA is doing, and maybe involved in the sort of helping to shape financial solutions for people as well. But I'm just going to move along and get your thoughts, and hopefully there'll be a decent discussion. Just by way of apology to SEAI, my talk now was supposed to be about this, so I will, if you can bear with us later on, we'll be, I think, revisiting the issue of district heating after lunch. So, yeah, thank you. That's my synopsis and your thoughts.